I chain smoke and I say fuck a lot. But I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised. CrazyDaysAndNights.net, February 13th, 2018. Direct this. I think it's possible that I may have found a director who is even worse than the Oscar winner A+ list director that has been in this space frequently, or even Woody Allen. The director of which I'm speaking is an Oscar winner, but not for what you might think. It is shockingly, actually, that he does not have more Oscar wins. You hope that this is in some small part due to his raping and abusing women throughout his career. Although the number of actresses he abused is in the dozens, I'm going to focus on just a few of his more notorious crimes. He raped 3 tweens during a casting process, and gave the role to the tween he said was the best in bed. He later ordered her to sleep with a much older foreign-born co-star on the movie who would go on to have an A-list career. That co-star injured her severely, and production had to be stopped for a week to allow her to recover. The director kept her around for a couple years under the guise of getting her more roles, but the real reason was he could send her out to find other tweens and early teens to bring back to his place. He'd get them drunk or slip them drugs and then rape them. He often filmed those rapes and would film the actress with the other tween and teen females. In the movie for which he is most famous, he had friends of one of his children come to the set with the child. All the friends were probably no older than 7 or 8. He molested a dozen of them at least during the filming of the movie, and filmed many of them. When he died, there were hundreds of hours of footage, which was some of the most extreme versions of child porn anywhere. I did find somebody that fits these pieces so far, but it's going to be controversial. I'm not saying he is the one, I'm just saying, so far, I found this one that fits these pieces. Here's the clues. He's a director, he won an Oscar, probably not for directing, and it's shocking he hasn't won more. He raped teens and tweens during casting and gave the role to the one he said was the best in bed. He made her sleep with much older co-star, kept her around for a few years, and he had his young daughter on the set of his most notable movie. Well, I hate to say it, and it could be just coincidence, but so far, Kubrick fits this. He was a director, won 1 Oscar, and it's quite surprising he hasn't won more. And it wasn't for Best Director or anything, it was Best Effects, Special Visual Effects, for 2001, A Space Odyssey. If this is the case, you can see that in Lolita that they auditioned over 800 teens and tweens. It says that he raped 3 of them and picked the one he thought was best in bed. It also says he made her sleep with the much older co-star. People are saying it could be James Mason or Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers was roughly 21 years older than Sue Lyon, and it's much older. But James Mason was 37 years older, much older. And James Mason was around even later. He was behind the scenes at The Shining, so he must have been friends with Kubrick.
And Mr. and Mrs. Piggott, Mr. Kubrick, and Mr. Willis. Mr. Kubrick, and that's Mr. Val.
How do you do?
This is incredible.
Well, this is just supposed to be.
Hi, Mr. Nicholson, how are you? Very nice to meet you. And this is all our gang. This is Mrs. Willis. And Katie and Liza. They're so excited. And Mr. and Mrs. Piggott. How do you do?
They also say that director kept her around for a few years under the guise of getting her more roles.
Well, I have a 5-year contract. I have a 7-year contract with Harris Kubrick. There will be 5 years left. And they make the decisions from now on. Mr. Harris is reading properties now, looking for something for me to do. And when he finds it, then we'll be making another picture.
And also I pointed out to them, I said, you know, you've made a tremendous amount of money off of me. And I think you owe me the respect to be who I am. I did your movie, and now I need to get on with the rest of my life. I'll be happy to work again, but not every second. So I did I did promotion tours for them that went on, I can't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years.
Kubrick had 2 daughters. Anya was born in 1959, Vivian in 1960. That would make them both roughly around the age of 7, 8, 9 years old. But Vivian had a reason to be on set at 2001. She had a small role. Escort. And then I started digging more. So here's what I found.
John, I knew you'd catch up with Lolita sooner or later. She was a fun girl.
Well, I suppose the first one is one that you always remember, and it will always be one of the most exciting days.
Well, I had done some small television parts, and my agent sent me on an interview for the part to Mr. London, who was a casting director for Mr. Harris and Mr. Kubrick. And he liked me, and so he sent me up to see them.
Did you know what the story was about?
Yes, I did. My mother had read the book, and we discussed the story. And she knew of their previous work. She knew that Mr. Harris and Mr. Kubrick do very artful pictures, and that they are not a quickie film company. She had quite a bit of faith in them.
I went on an interview to Stanley Kubrick and Jimmy Harris. And I had been told it was for a television series. And I went in, and usually in Hollywood, when you go on interviews, they say, hello, what's your name? Thank you very much, goodbye. These two said things like, where do you date? Where do you go? What do you do? What time do you come home? What does your mother think of that? Where did you buy that dress? But I didn't think they were making a film. I thought they were just amusing themselves. They took care of me in every way.
One of the most frequent questions I've received about The Shining over the years is, what does the guy in the bear costume mean? The popular interpretation is that the scene is a throwback to a subplot of Stephen King's novel in which a party guest in a dog costume has a homosexual relationship with one of the hotel's former owners. Now, the first thing to note is that in the film the guy is dressed in a bear costume instead of a dog costume. A shift from dog to bear doesn't have any significant effect on the aesthetic scariness of the scene, so there must have been some sort of logic at work in Kubrick's decision. And I think it's more than just a case of, oh, we couldn't find a dog costume, so we just used a bear costume. I'm sure you'll agree with that as we go on. The second obvious factor is that Kubrick has omitted the entire backstory associated to the dog-costumed man in the novel, leaving his audience at a complete loss as to this scene's meaning. Seems like a pretty damn clumsy thing to do. If you're going to remove that whole backstory, then why have the bear-costumed or dog-costumed man in the film at all? It seems like an amateur mistake to make, and Kubrick was a hell of a lot more in depth than that. He would spend years revising scripts, having other writers work with him on scripts, making sure things that were all ironed out nicely. He wouldn't just make a stupid mistake like that. The switch from dog to bear is an essential key because there are lots of other suspicious appearances of bears in the movie. We'll start with the easiest one to notice, which is in the scene of Danny talking to the psychiatrist. Danny has just had a nightmare vision in the bathroom, so his mother has called a doctor. In the close-up of Danny, we see that his pillow has a teddy bear face on it, which is placed prominently in shot next to his head. If Kubrick didn't intend that to be there, then it's quite a mistake because it's rather distracting visually. The link is that both of these bear appearances are featured in relation to beds or bedrooms. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore by slowly building up to my interpretation of this theme. I'll just say it outright. Danny has most likely been sexually abused by his father, Jack, and this bear fellatio scene symbolises the abuse. Here's a piece of evidence which on its own very strongly supports the abuse theme. When Jack's employers approach him in the lobby on closing day, Jack is reading a January 1978 issue of Playgirl magazine, not Playboy. So first of all, there's the obvious homosexual innuendo, but the story titles featured on this particular issue include Incest, Why Parents Sleep with Their Children. Returning to the comparisons between the bear-costumed man scene and Danny talking to the psychiatrist, sexuality is subtly referenced in the second scene and very obviously referenced in the bear scene. The bear man appears to be giving fellatio to the man on the bed, just as the dog man in the book was carrying out a sexual submission role with his partner. The open patch on the bear man's behind in the film simply adds to the sexual emphasis. And in the psychiatrist scene, things are a little bit more subtle, but when you pay attention to it, it's rather obvious. Danny lays on the bed with his jeans removed and his hands curiously covering his groin area. And the dialogue is full of innuendos about abuse.
Is Tony one of your animals? No, he's a little bat that lives in my mouth.
Tony's his imaginary friend.
Oh. If you were to open your mouth now, could I see Tony?
No,
Why not?
because he hides
Where does he go?
in my stomach.
Does Tony ever tell you to do things?
I don't want to talk about Tony anymore.
Our partial view of the fellatio bear before he leans back from the bed also matches our partial view of Danny brushing his teeth before his first shining vision. Danny's mouth will be full of frothy toothpaste, and the bear-suited man, well, I'm sure you can come up with your own image of what's in his mouth. So, are these strange parallels implying that Jack forced his son to perform fellatio? And if so, when did it happen? Well, I'm going to condense things a little bit here because there's a hell of a lot of evidence, but I'm just going to give you the shortest version that I can. As I've outlined in my full article on The Shining, it was Jack who strangled Danny just after the end of the fatherly love scene here, and it happened right after the conversation ended where there was a jolt of music.
You would never hurt Mommy or me, would you?
I love you more than anything else in the whole world. I would never do anything to hurt you. Never. You know that, don't you? Hmm?
Yes, Dad.
Good.
Wendy then correctly blames Jack for the choking injuries after she sees Danny sucking his thumb.
You did this to him, didn't you? You son of a bitch!
I like to be left alone, really. I enjoy my my security, my safeness with a private life.
That's why we had so much trouble to find you, maybe.
Maybe. It's not that I'm hiding anything.
Then I guess this is goodbye.
Yes.
Don't forget me. Don't forget me.
Fucking stoned.